As always, you can watch this in one piece on Blip. Now, with the Game Boy Color outing, we had a game that brought in a lot of plot and details from the book series, but completely failed to make it all engaging or work as a game. On the other hand, the PC game, Know the Secret, was pretty much the opposite of this, being an original story and not paying much mind to the Animorphs continuity, but it still told its story competently. It got us to engage with the characters on some level, and the gameplay, while not all that fun, complemented the narrative. It's basically pick your poison. You can have a game that's close to the books but utter shit, or a game not really in line with the books but at least playable. But hey, there's a third Animorphs video game. How does that handle the story to gameplay equation? By chucking the books completely out the window, stuffing its face in Skittles and fruit roll-ups, and giving us a platformer where the Animorphs jump around and collect coins. This is Animorphs Shattered Reality for the PlayStation.
I am an elemist. Since the dawn of time, I have observed every detail of the universe. My interests have taken me far and wide, studying beings on worlds throughout the cosmos. Recently, my attention has been drawn to a conflict on a small blue world known as Earth. Ruthless aliens called the Yeerk have begun an invisible invasion, taking control of human minds, turning them into helpless slaves. But now, everything has changed. The Yeerk leader, Visor 3, gained control of a weapon powered by a continuum crystal. But the weapon was more powerful than expected. The crystal exploded. It shattered reality itself. Only one thing stands between the Yeerk and ultimate victory. Young heroes called the Animorphs.
I find this game a bit of a conundrum. On one hand, you could easily argue that this is actually the best of the three Animorph video games, in that it's the most competently designed and funnest to play. On the other hand, for me personally, it was the most frustrating of the three, as there are a bunch of little things that keep the game from going from a competent kind of platformer to a good platformer. Shattered Reality is brought to us by Single Track, best known for creating one of the very first franchises exclusive for the PlayStation, Twisted Metal, a game about killing people with a souped-up ice cream truck because all the other vehicles were boring, so of course you're gonna play as the psychotic clown. Vehicle games were pretty much Single Track's entire shtick. The only major exception prior to Animorphs was 1998's Outwars, a science fiction shooter. Note that none of these are either licensed games or platformers, which makes Shattered Reality kind of an odd duck on their resume. Now, according to an interview with Single Track's senior programmer Jay Barson, there were two major issues going on with the studio at the time this game was being developed. The first was the slow dissolving of the Single Track brand after it had been acquired by publishing company Infogrames. Barson himself got laid off along with half the studio before the game had been finished. The second was the Columbine High School massacre on April 20th, 1999. a lot of media attention suddenly turned to video games, especially Doom. This was when the concept of violent video games causing real-life violence was really starting to kick off, was really starting to be discussed, and according to Bardson, it had a deep effect on Shattered Reality's production. Scholastic and Kay Applegate grew concerned and wanted to distance themselves from anything resembling violent video games, even though the books themselves got pretty violent at times. They demand that we radically change the game design, salvaging what work we could, but the release date wasn't going to move too much. Honestly, I read Michael Grant going off on Twitter about gun laws not getting passed, and I can actually see the Applegate/Grant household getting caught up in the violent video game bullshit. So it turns out Shattered Reality wasn't even originally a platformer, but turned into one at the 11th hour. The new design was much more of a platformer, but that style of game wasn't one of our strengths. It was a really pretty crazy scramble to redesign and rewrite the game to get it ready for release. One can only speculate what the original game was going to be. There's official production art floating around there for this game, and it's actually really pretty and well done, though you have to ignore the fact that they replaced Andalite stock eyes with horns for some reason. One promotional poster used the tagline, "Time changes everything," which makes me wonder if there was originally a time travel element to the game that didn't make the final cut. So with that in mind, is it fair to judge a game like this? One that was completely overhauled at the last minute in a style that the studio was totally unfamiliar with? I'm going to say yes. Yes, the consequences around it are unfortunate, but people still caved in to what turned out to be a bullshit charge, which is as much a production decision as anything else we'll see in this game. I mean, this is a book series about Rachel beating up people with her own severed limbs, about a Hork-Bajir ripping on its own skull to show off it doesn't have a yerk in its head, about David dumping a dead body down an elevator shaft. We're well beyond the disturbing violence threshold at the point this game came out. Oh well. So yes, the game was distributed by Infogrames, a French company who also distributed Animorphs Know the Secret. Look at these jewel cases, they look almost exactly the same. I have grabbed the wrong disc more than once while doing this project. You couldn't have had someone do alternate box art for one of these? I could commission someone on DeviantArt to do an acceptable bit of art for $40. But you know, between a publishing company that doesn't care to differentiate its games and a company that cut single-track staff in half like Fruit Ninja during the production of a game, and single-track being forced to suddenly overhaul the game into a style they have no experience with, Animorphs Shattered Reality is not a total disaster. It's actually a game, unhampered by utter incompetence like the Game Boy Color outing, or annoying hand-holding like Know the Secret. It's pretty straightforward. You move forward, jumping from platform to platform, because Cassie is really known for huge vertical leaps, avoid obstacles, grab collectibles, and occasionally get some minor dumbed-down combat. Now you might be saying, hey, that doesn't sound like Animorphs. And you'd be right, but the game has that covered. The plot here is that Visor 3 has found a device powered by something called continuum crystals. We never know where all of these crystals came from or what exactly they're supposed to do. I'm guessing it's just another unnecessary reality machine that the Elemist has lying around in his junk drawer. The device explodes, which shatters reality. What exactly does that mean? Well, it means that the developers can put whatever the fuck they want in the game because reality is shattered and warped and whatever. It's great because it gives them the excuse to make an Animorphs game without them having to actually read any of the books. You could throw in Larry Bird as the new 6th Animorph and you'd have to roll with it because reality has been shattered and anything goes. So you get to choose from the 4 main Animorphs. Tobias and Axe only show up in the game's opening and closing cinematics. The difference between the characters is purely cosmetic. They all jump the same, walk the same, and fight the same. There's no Super Mario Bros. 2 system where each playable character has their own distinct advantages and disadvantages. There's only slight differences in animation, most notably Rachel's character who does little gymnastic flips when she jumps, and they each have their own unique quips at certain points in the game.
Bizarro green slime!
Should have worn my lead bikini.
I don't know if I like the looks of this.
These are some eager beavers.
Yeah, everyone is a comedian. Unlike Know the Secret, which had a rather awesome all-star cast of B-list voice actors, most of the voices here are just one-and-dones, this game being their only credit. They don't exactly do a bad job here, but reading off one-liners is a bit different from actually acting. Each character also has their own battle morph, but again the differences are purely cosmetic. Jake morphs a tiger, Rachel a grizzly bear, Cassie a dire wolf, and Marco a rhino. Okay, we're 3 for 3 here. 3 games that won't allow Marco to morph his trademark gorilla. I just don't get it. Combat is super simple. There are these designated combat areas that automatically morph you into your combat animal, and you bash an alien with a single attack until it dies. There's a 2-minute timer, I assume to represent the 2-hour limit on morphs in the books, but with the exception of the very final boss fight, no fight really goes over 30 seconds unless you intentionally lag. You're going to be using one of 2 strategies in combat, either bashing the attack button, or attacking, stepping back to avoid the creature's counterattack, and then moving forward to attack again. Some aliens absorb more damage, and sometimes you're fighting 2 at once, but it really shouldn't give you too much trouble. Actually, you want to know what one of the tougher enemies in the game is? Geds. Yes, Geds, because I'm starting to pronounce it correctly now. I'm not kidding. Those tiny little half-blind, club-footed monkey creatures that all the minimum wage yerks got to infest are tougher than the slacks-wearing howlers. Look at them. They're wearing slacks. I mean, Geds, they're not actually hard, far from it, but when I first encountered them, I totally underestimated them and actually lost my first fight. That's not as bad as a yerk slug killing an elephant, but it's not far off. I'd put the combat as second best of the 3 Animorph games. Like the Game Boy Color game, combat is singular, there's no group combat, and you don't heal when you morph. But it's also the only game with real-time combat instead of turn-based, which is truer to the hectic violence of the books. Of course, said violence is toned down considerably. Monsters die with a really quick green explosion, and when your character dies, it becomes a wisp of pixie dust or something. And you will die. A lot. Obviously not from combat, but from the platforming.